Mental Health Monday
on Radio City Talk
with Mick Coyle.
Tackling the stigma.
Radio City Talk.
My name's Mick. I hope you're well. Back for Mental Health Monday, back for another week, and another great guest in the studio to talk about mental health on the radio. We've got the chief executive of an organisation which is a national organisation now, but actually started out in Liverpool and talks about mental health on a daily basis, but also has spread its wings to discuss other things as well, to help people who maybe come from vulnerable backgrounds, maybe people with disabilities, people with lived experience of things like addiction, mental health issues, drug, alcohol issues, ex-offenders as well. It's a mixed old bag, but a really interesting work from Imagine Independence. And Chief Exec Margaret Hanson joins us in the studio. Margaret, great to get you on the programme. Thank you for your time.
Here. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, not a problem at all. I'm really interested to hear about the work that you do because it's become widespread, both in terms of the topics and the issues that you cover, and also geographically the area in which you cover them.
Yeah. Well, we started off back in the mid-70s. Depends who you ask which year they think we started. But the organisation has its roots in Liverpool. It started its mission by supporting people to move out of some of the long-stay hospitals that were around at the time, Rainhill in particular, because my original trustees believed that people that were there at that time could live in the community. So we were at the cutting edge of care in the community at that, back in the 70s when it was a less than popular topic, mental health and mental illness. Well,
and I think this is a really crucial sort of, so in terms of how we frame and the issue of mental health now. What was the experience at that time? What were the sort of situations that people were finding themselves in that needed an organisation like you Imagine to sort of emerge? And
yeah, I think lots of people have been in the old language been put away into some of these big institutions because they transgressed one of society's rules, or they had a minor disability, a minor learning disability, something that today we wouldn't consider to be a reason to go and live most of your adult life in a large institution. But at that time, that's the response that was out there. And so lots of people did become institutionalised. So they went in with maybe one problem and ended up with lots more. But because of the reasons why people were going into those hospitals, my original trustees, believed passionately that they could have a different quality of life. And that's the passion that still drives us today.
Presumably there was a system in place there that was thinking that it was doing what was best for those individuals. It almost seems like there was malice involved in keeping these people away and almost sort of doubling down on some of the issues they faced. But presumably those who were working there were following the guidance and the guidelines, the knowledge at the time.
I think it was just that's how it was. That was the practice at the time. And I think people have come a hell of a long way since then in terms of how they understand what creates mental illness in particular and our response as a society to those issues. Now, people would have been put away because they were a single mum back in the 20s and 30s, so very different standards to those that we have today.
And I guess as well, in terms of the understanding, the number of people who must have found themselves in that situation who may have needed a little bit of help, maybe advice, something within their community or their own home environment. But because they were placed within an institution, maybe, the stigma maybe that comes with that potentially would have caused damage as well to them in terms of their potential recovery.
Absolutely. I mean, people weren't seen to be capable of recovery back in the day. And very much they were taken out of their communities and it would have been known where they were going, depending on which community we're talking about. I live in North Wales and the asylum in Denbigh was known as the Big House. And people knew who'd gone in and it was rare that anybody ever came out. But if they did come and live very much with that stigma.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because although it's almost historic now talking about language like that, asylum and, the Big House, and people have those connotations. It's not that long ago.
No.
It's only really one generation ago to the world that we're in now.
Yeah. I would have been in my teens, and I was saying to somebody last week, I've been watching White House Farm, the serial drama doc that's been on ITV on a Wednesday night over the last couple of weeks, and it's absolutely fascinating. But some of the language that's used there about one of the main characters around the fact that she had schizophrenia it pulls me up short, but that's only 1985, 86. So, my kids were born not that long after that. And yet in a whole generation, our language and some of how we feel more able to talk about mental health has shifted. But I think where it's not really shifted enough is when we get into talking about mental illness.
So what was the offer from Imagine Independence back then in terms of this guidance and the sort of almost the institutionalization of people? What were you saying then, and what was the organisation saying then about a different pathway, about another way of dealing with things?
Well, I wasn't there, but from what people tell me, when I first started in the job 18 months ago, people did say to me, there's a lot of history in the organisation, and there absolutely is. But from what people tell me, and a couple of the original trustees are still around, and I've had the privilege of talking to them about this stuff, it was very much they were concerned citizens from Liverpool and a couple of the academics from the university at the time who believed there was a different way, advocating on behalf of those people that were in the institutions. And I suppose taking campaigns and taking the fight to decision makers who, after a number of years of listening to the arguments being framed, said, well, if you think that's how it can be, go on then, you have a go. And they did. And lots of people's lives have been transformed ever since.
It's really interesting that's happened. And again, that we're not speaking in a historic context, we're speaking in a relatively recent context as well. But I kind of get the sense as well that argument, which was put forward by your trustees, back then, has almost been won at a national level now, that the work that you do now kind of fits in with a national view of how we deal potentially with people in regard to poor mental health, mental illnesses, which just goes to show, I'm not saying your guys were right, but they were on the right path, ahead of the system, if you like, ahead of the guidance.
Yeah. And one of the things that Imagine's always done is do that cutting edge work and go into areas that other people maybe think are a bit risky. But having said that, we talk a lot more about mental well-being, and we understand some of the drivers that cause mental illness. But we don't really talk about mental illness as such. So there is still a lot of stigma about some of those more clinical diagnoses that people get, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, etc. And I think one of the things we're doing at Imagine is wanting people to have conversations about that as well, and to take away some of the myths around them.
Well, can I ask you about that? Because, of course, independence and people's ability to live independently, of course, is a dream for some people. If they think, well, if there's a diagnosis here, then I'm going to be, as you mentioned before, put away. I'm not going to have access to my friends and my family. But actually, the offer there of independence, supported through your journey, whereby there's help if you need it, and if you want to just go about your business, that's fine. If you want to do that independently as well, that must be a huge offer to somebody who thinks that terrible things are going to happen to them as a result of the stigma that may come with a diagnosis.
Yeah, and I think very much the way in which we work is about working alongside and walking alongside people, not doing it for them. So having ongoing conversations about how they want their lives to look, and then putting together very individualised packages of support for them, with the ultimate aim, which sometimes we achieve and other times we don't, of not needing to be there. But for a lot of people, they will always choose to have someone walking alongside them, and we hope that will be Imagine Independence.
From a point of view of a success story, from your point of view of somebody maybe coming through your door or being referred to you for the first time, what would a success story look like?
Depends very much on the individual. So some people will have one episode of mental ill health and may never have another one across their life course. So for that person, it would be the support and guidance to access community-based services to move them on that journey, usually back into some work or some volunteering, some meaningful activity, because we're really very clear that volunteering and education and employment are good for people. And so very often in the mix, we will support people to access those opportunities. For somebody else, they may be living with an ongoing mental illness, but that doesn't mean they can't live with meaning either. So it is about that conversation with them about what good looks like for them, and then doing everything we can to support them to achieve that.
What sort of things do people say when they talk about living with meaning? and living, a life of opportunity and aspiration?
Depends on the individual, and it depends on what their previous experience has been. So for some people, if they've been in a locked environment, which some of the people even now that we support has been, to come out and just live in the community, because on a street the same as you or I would live on, with their own front door, their own private facilities, their own TV, things that a lot of us take for granted, to them that's a huge achievement. And then to go on a journey towards employment or education. So we've got one young guy that discovered he had a particular talent for baking. So he's now back in one of the city colleges where he goes every day and he is baking, and he bakes as gifts and he gives cakes to people. And for him, that is success. Somebody else might, frame it in a different way. But we are very much about bringing out with people their own dreams and hopes, but also those skills and talents that we all have.
Baking is such a great gift to be able to give, isn't it? I mean, if you suddenly find you are very good at pottery, great, but we only need so many bowls.
Yeah.
But
never get enough cake.
If a cake comes around, that's when you think things are looking up.
Absolutely.
When the day starts with a cake arriving, particularly from someone you know, so a thank you message. Your office must be full of people who are just thinking, right.
We roll.
We've got Margaret Hanson with us in the studio from Imagine Independence, operating for many decades now across the whole of the northwest of England. They're also got a base in London as well. It says here you support around about 2,000 people a year. That's a significant number of people.
It is, yeah. Many of those will be coming through our services that are probably a little bit less high profile. So there'll be the things like groups of people doing walking football, photography, cinema groups, drama groups. Many of those groups are actually organised by people with lived experience of mental illness. So particularly in London, we have lots of user-led groups, and they've, for example, just started a young people's group, which is absolutely brilliant. But, if you count all of those together, and then we're in, I think, about 30 separate locations in Merseyside, plus all the people that we support in Lancashire and Cumbria, and it soon adds up.
A young person diagnosed with schizophrenia in 2020, a young person diagnosed with bipolar disorder, what might the future look like for them versus a diagnosis of the same thing 15 or 20 years ago? If you're a young person now with a diagnosis like that, presumably you're operating now in a world which is a little bit more understanding, but still comes with challenges, but nothing like the stigmas of the past, potentially. Well, I'm trying to get a sense of. I spoke to many people on the program who got a diagnosis of many of those types of things from a mental illness point of view at the turn of the millennium through the 1990s as well. But I think if we're going to get this right in regards to mental illness and how we treat people who are living with mental illness, we need to be getting it right at the point of diagnosis to allow them a pathway through life that's fair and right and just to them.
It would certainly be different from what it was 20 years ago, and certainly 50 years ago. And I'm not clinically trained, so, this is my opinion. However, I think there was a report in the papers last week that said there's still a postcode lottery in terms of access to services. Now, you're never going to get that out of the system because of how the NHS in particular is set up these days. But there is still a disadvantage to being born in a community such as the 6 inner city wards in Liverpool, as opposed to some of the leafy suburbs of Surrey. So you've got a double disadvantage because some of the mental illness will be driven by the poverty within those communities in the first place, and then the services that you can access are maybe less amenable than they would have been otherwise. If you can get into services and you can get the right services and the right support, then your outlook is certainly better than it would have been. But there are still a lot of myths around some of those diagnoses. So, for example, if you ask the man or woman on the street what a schizophrenic person looks like, to use that horrible term, they might think they were a violent person. but I think all of the stats show that somebody with schizophrenia is more likely to be attacked than to be the attacker. So there are still a lot of myths around it, and I think there's still a long way to go to bust some of those.
What are the things you hear, Margaret, in regard to mental health and mental illness that makes you think, oh, hang on a minute, can we just go over that again?
Well, there is the myth that people with schizophrenia, diagnosed with schizophrenia, are violent people. Absolutely not. They are more at risk of being the victims of violence, as are people with other mental health conditions, because they are still seen as other within our community, and they're easy targets. So there's that one. And then there's very often a statistic bandied around that 1 in 4 of us will have a mental illness. I think that needs to be put into the context of that's at any one time. And it's not a mental illness, it is a challenge with our mental health. Actually, across our lifetime, 70% of us will have a mental health challenge. So we may be low in mood, we may have other anxiety, one of the more common disorders and mental health disorders. But the chances of us actually having a clinically diagnosed illness such as schizophrenia or bipolar are relatively low. So I think it's some of those things.
I think this has come up many times before about this idea now where there's so many conversations that are about being in touch with your mental health, about spotting signs of when you're not feeling so great and feeling okay to talk about it as well. But mental illness can be something very different when there is, but I guess there's a tipping point in a moment, and you'll see this through Imagine, when somebody's negative mental health situation gets to the point where you find yourself in a diagnosable position as well, and presumably you see those marks and those borders, and you build up an expertise, if you like, of knowing where those lines are. I
think very often the individual themselves, if they've been ill in the past, will be able to describe what the issues are that should indicate to other people, the triggers in the language that people use, that what will actually indicate to someone that they are becoming unwell again, and they have hopefully enough time to say to someone, I need help again. I think the challenges around people who are becoming unwell for the first time, and part of becoming mentally ill, is that some of that insight can go, or some of your, certainly people's ability to judge rationally how they're feeling themselves becomes less. So they can spiral into a real crisis quite quickly.
And in terms of that, when you're dealing with people, maybe you've had sort of drug and alcohol issues as well, you deal with ex-offenders as well, your interaction with them, does it have to be, almost like day by day? Can it be week by week, month by month? Can you go long periods of times with having no connection with a person and yet still be able to maintain sort of a healthy monitoring of them?
Not in the services that we deliver. So in the formal services, we are there 24/7, right, the year round, in most of them. And they're the ones where we're doing supported housing. So we don't do clinical support at all, but we are in there helping people with their everyday lives and the issues that brings all of us. So we do get to know those people really, really well. And many of the people that we work with will have lived in their homes for a number of years since they came out of whichever locked environment they were in previously. So it is very much a day-to-day thing with many of them, and particularly the more challenging behaviours that people bring because of drug and alcohol misuse, because they've been in a locked environment, probably because they've been traumatised in their childhood or in their youth. That is a very complex mix, and we do need to get to know people by, as I said earlier, walking alongside them and listening to them and understanding them.
Presumably you do your best to try and be as almost non-invasive as possible.
Absolutely.
Even though you've got to have that full-on contact, you don't want to be seen to be just what they had maybe before, but from a different way. No,
I mean, certainly all the services across Merseyside, people have just come and go, live as much as they can, the life that they've described they want to live. So there's one guy who's absolutely brilliant, he makes me laugh. His idea of a life with meaning is taking himself out clubbing on a Tuesday night down in town. And every time I see him, he says, when am I going to go down to Flares with him and dance on the 1970s dance floor? But, that's one example. Other people, there's another young woman that we support who's one of the youngest people we work alongside. For her, the big triumph was actually going down to the corner sweet shop and getting to know the people in that sweet shop, because she has a learning disability. So her, at times, her behaviours can be a bit not what would fall within the norm. And the fact that she got to know the people in the sweet shop and could actually go there when she wanted to buy a bar of chocolate or some sweets or whatever, bottle of pop, whatever it was she wanted, to her that was a huge achievement.
Sometimes people get referred to as partners or clients. Is there what word do you use?
We use people.
People,
yeah. It's very easy to fall into jargon, and certainly when we talk to the people who work for the NHS, I think we tend to have a little bit more formal language. But I think we'd absolutely hate to the people that live in our houses, well, they're not our houses, they're their homes, for those people to hear us describe them as anything other than by their first name.
You also do work going into schools, projects that go into schools, that are also going into businesses. Here's a loaded question. Who are more open to changing their perceptions and attitudes to mental health? Young people in schools or businesses?
When we go into schools, very often it's because we've been invited in by the teachers who are concerned at the levels of anxiety, low mood, self-harm and all that other stuff that I'm a parent myself. My youngest teenage son has literally just come out of the school system. And so anybody that's had a child in that system over the last few years will know what the mix is. So it's teachers saying to us, look, we need to skill ourselves up as that school team to have better conversations with our young people and to know what the right thing to say is and how to get them help more quickly than the formal system can sometimes provide it. The young people themselves don't seem to have some of the same hang-ups about difference right across the board. And mental health is just another difference, or someone with a learning disability. So that's really positive and encouraging. Businesses very much, certainly in the city where we tend to work with the small and medium-sized businesses, although we have done some of the big employers in Knowsley and places, they tend to want to do the right thing, but they don't know what the right thing is. So they're very open to the conversations with us, but they don't want... There is this fear generally about if you have a conversation and you have the wrong conversation, you could actually make somebody worse. Or if somebody's having suicidal thoughts, prompt them to go through to die by suicide. And absolutely that's not the case, but it is about giving people the confidence to have quality conversations. So employers... see it as in they don't know what to do and they want to do something. They observe on their sickness absence levels, all those that data that tells them they've got a challenge, that they should be doing something. The health and safety executive tells them they should be doing something. That there's guidance and advice from the government, but actually taking all of that information and doing something with it in the workplace. Where would you start? And lots of them don't have HR departments because they're only small. So they don't even have as we do, we're very fortunate, we've got a HR person, don't even have that resource to say, let's go down this path. So very much we go in and we have those conversations.
And what do they say afterwards to you about the session and about what it's brought to them?
We get some wonderful feedback. So for those people who actually come on the course, which is the mental health first aid course in most circumstances, they say they now feel confident to have the conversations. We get feedback that people have had those conversations and feel as though they've intervened with someone who was about to die by suicide and have actually saved a life, which is always like the best feedback you can get. But then there is still an appetite out there to do the next step. So it's how you know what difference those interventions have made in terms of what's that training got you in terms of an improved workplace, improved productivity, whatever the outcomes are they want to see. So one of the things we're currently working on is an audit tool so that we can go in and help businesses to measure the difference that having an environment in work that supports people's mental health and well-being and supports them to flourish. What difference does that make?
Absolutely, because I think that's one of the concerns that people would have, where they go, well, you know what, you've had your mental health first aid training in the same way you've had your physical health, so therefore we're all now better equipped and let's just keep everything the same. But actually what you're describing there is this idea that maybe the workplace changes, and with the audit you can spot those signs and keep on top of it for the good of both the business and the workers as well. Hey, the good thing about Imagine Independence is you've got jobs as well, and you're currently hiring. You've got an engaged worker salary job based here in Liverpool. You're hiring, and people can sign up. Why would they want to join the team, or why should they join the team?
Well, if you actually want to get up in the morning and just earn a salary, it's probably not the place for you to work. But if you want to get up in the morning and make a real difference to people's lives, Imagine is the organisation for you, because in lots of ways, day in, day out, you will see that you've made a difference by the work that you do.
If you want to find out more information about that particular job, but also the work of Imagine, then you can head to the website imagineindependence.org.uk. That's the right website, isn't it? imagineindependence.org.uk. And there's loads of links on there as well. The current vacancies section has got the links to the job, which is currently available in Liverpool, but you do operate across the northwest of England as well, so people can keep an eye out there.
We do services for people with learning disabilities, and so we're always looking for people who have got got that special mix of wanting to work with people, for people. We're always looking out for those. Plus, we've got lots of great volunteering opportunities, particularly in Liverpool. So we're always on the lookout for good quality volunteers who maybe just want to give something back to their community, or who may, as in many cases, be looking to help develop their CV. So if there's any students out there, we're always looking for students. We're right in the middle of university land. We're based on Hope Street. So we're always on the lookout for people to come and get involved in our activities.
imagineindependence.org.uk. Margaret Hanson, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure getting you on the programme today. Really enjoyed you,
Mick.
Joining us today at Mental Health Monday from Radio City Talk. Don't forget, you can find mental health services close to you using the Hub of Hope, hubofhope.co.uk. Tap in your postcode there. You'll find all the mental health services that are close to you. And the great thing about the Hub of Hope is that everyone who's signed up wants you to contact them. It might be for yourself or for someone that you know. hubofhope.co.uk.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle
on Radio City Talk.